It's even more urgent now. The UK is in a serious and precarious position, and there is a real risk of a downward spiral. The national debt was $525 billion in 2005. By 2022, it had quadrupled to $2.5 trillion, and it's set to drop $3 trillion within 3 to 4 years. I believe we can get out of this, but the only way to get out of the debt spiral is to get a grip on public spending while implementing policies to grow the economy. I urge the government to be bold and to set out a clear vision of how the UK can get to sustained 3% annual growth within a decade. This should set out a clear 10-year trajectory for reducing the size of the state as a proportion of our economy through a combination of growth and spending control. We should aim to get that ratio we achieved at the turn of the millennium, before Blair and Brown turned on the spending tax and excess regulation made us uncompetitive. And we need to give people hope that things can get better. We need to spell out what 3% growth would mean in terms of improved standard of living and opportunities for an average family. A new car, a holiday abroad, more support for your children. And ministers need to go out and explain the why as well as the how. We need to make the case for free market economics and admit the state has got too big, partly as a result of excess spending during COVID. We need to show an enterprise economy is good for everyone. Conservatives can't just assume people have read Milton Friedman. We need to spell out our philosophy. And that would contrast with Labour's lack of ideas and force them to defend the stale economic consensus started under Blair and Brown. Now, in order to deliver this, there's going to be big change required. We need a new supply-side revolution. The supply-side revolution in the 1980s was all about taking on unproductive industry and the unions, which held the whip hand over the elected government of the day. The supply-side revolution now has to take on the burden of regulation and an overlarge, overpowerful bureaucracy, which has the whip hand over the elected government. This supply-side revolution has to encompass changes to tax, regulation, and the size of the state. The government needs to take on the OBR over the impact of tax policy, and we need to see much more sophisticated levels of analysis from the Treasury about long-term economic growth. This needs a wide variety of thinkers, including monetarists and supply-siders. We can't afford to be uncompetitive internationally. We need corporation tax back at 19%, and we should also refuse to implement the OECD minimum tax agreement, which I've previously labelled a cartel of complacency. It won't be implemented in the US, and even if it was, it would make the entire West uncompetitive. We also need to reduce marginal tax rates to make it worthwhile to work at every income level. Further changes like abolishing the tourist tax, abolishing the windfall tax, and sorting out IR35 need to be made. We also need to get a grip on the ballooning welfare and pensions bill. This means slowing the rates of increase to benefits and tougher work requirements. It means raising the retirement age further. And as a party, we have to deal with the difficult issue of the increasing cost of pensions. The current trajectory is not sustainable. We need more competition and less corporatism in key sectors of the economy, like energy and finance. I favour a single utilities regulator to get rid of the balkanisation and capture that we've seen under organisations like Ofwat and Ofgem. The government needs to divest its shares in banks and withdraw from micromanagement in sectors like transport. And in the energy sector, we need to get on with fracking and abolish the windfall tax. In the housing market, there should be tax breaks in return for having new developments and homes in your area, a much simpler zoning process and speeded up infrastructure projects. That's what the original investment zones I proposed were about. We should diverge properly from the EU so we can increase competitiveness in areas like financial services. And finally, we should, as many other Western countries are already doing, delay implementing net zero commitments, such as the ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles from 2030. Other environmental regulations which are hiking the cost of living, like enforcing the replacement of gas and oil boilers, should also be abandoned.